Good morning, everybody. Hello to everyone in the chat. Hello to my very special guest, Nadja.
Aja, you got it. We
There
didn't
you go.
even
I've been
talk about
practicing. I said your name so wrong yesterday. I said it more of a Nadia, which is, I get it. It was
Yep.
wrong. And I'm always willing to admit when I'm wrong, and I will work on it. So thank you very much for joining me.
Yes.
You are also affectionately known as Acupunk. That's your YouTube channel.
Yes.
And I would like to share that with everybody and encourage everybody to go ahead and subscribe to your channel. It is at Acupunk, so very simple, straightforward. And you are a protester of Scientology.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yep.
Thanks for joining me. We got a few people in the chat here. Would love to say hello to some regulars if you're okay with that.
Of course.
We got D Savage. Hello. One Love 51,000. Hello. SP Chef, who is going to be joining me for an interview on Friday, an update on his life, which is unfortunately not good news, but it's an important conversation to have. We got Kelsey Mills from Cuba. Wow. That is one thing I love about doing this live stuff on YouTube. It just reaches everywhere because like SP Chef, he's from Switzerland. We got Cuba. Auntie, I think she's in the UK somewhere. We got Mary, who's from Canada, one of my more frequent supporters and supporters of SPTV in general. This person's on your channel, Freelance Adventure.
Yay! Hey, KK.
Yay! Yes, they've been in your videos. They've been down there in Austin as well, protesting. Awesome. And then, of course, Hans Christian Schwartz, who is also a big supporter and in Canada. So for everyone who I didn't say specifically hello to, hello to the replay crew. We are talking with Nadja of Acupunk. And I would like to start off with a little bit of your backstory. So on your description in your channel, it says you are protesting in Austin, Texas. My siblings and I technically are quote unquote born in Church Scientology, but not raised in. And you don't know much of the history of that. And so I would love to know what you're talking about there. What's your story?
Yeah. So I don't actually know when my parents really became Scientologists. I have so we lived out in Naples, New York, which is like in the Finger Lakes region of New York. And they lived in this kind of hippie commune area where I think that they were setting up an independent Scientology community. I know this sounds weird, but it's one of these like fringe things in the 70s where it was like still a bunch of hippies and thinking that they're, anti-establishment and like that it's this new thing. And my father was a craftsman. And so they were trying to set up like a school out there, artist community that was, to my knowledge, which I don't have a lot of it, but it was some kind of Scientology thing. And so then he picked us up and moved us to Buffalo, New York. And so I know that he was working on the buildings, like helping fix up buildings in Buffalo, New York for Scientology. And so we were like super poor. My brother had like a pet cockroach, like really,
wow.
And then I know I have a very strange siblings, different parents. It's a very strange family. And then my older brother, he's about 8 years older than me. I spoke to him recently, meaning last year, which I hadn't spoken to him since I was 19. He told me, he said, because we have the same mother. I come from what I now know to be two narcissists, one covert, my father, overt, my mother. Anyway, he said the one good thing that our mother did for him was to bring him in for tutoring in Scientology, which I'm like,
Oh,
I have no. So, but he's someone who he was kidnapped by his father, taken to Israel when he was little, and then
what?
didn't come back. It's a crazy. I have a really crazy life story and
Yeah.
family story.
You should just do a video on that because I'm very interested now.
Yeah.
Here,
So
here I was thinking of just a very quick story, but now I'm just like
sorry.
opening up this whole Pandora's box kind of
Yes.
thing. Carry
So
on.
so anyway, I just recently found out about that, and then he hasn't spoken to me since that conversation, and
Yeah.
I don't. Maybe he's involved with Scientology somehow. He
Mm.
lives out in California. I live in Texas. Um, we're not close. I also have an older sister who could shed some light on stuff, but she disowned me. So there's weird disconnection in my family, not really related to Scientology, but it's the same, how so many people are interested in this Scientology thing, and it's or cults in general, and it's because of this coercive control and how these family units operate like cults. And
Yeah.
so
Interesting. So you believe then that your parents were more of like in the independent field versus part of the mother church?
well, then I have these memories. So we lived in Buffalo,
Hmm.
and then we moved to Rochester, New York. And I have, which it's weird because it just came out during my protesting,
Mm.
but I'll briefly mention it. I was molested when I was 4 years old
Mm.
by a neighbor, and I remembered going somewhere like when I was 4 to a place.
Yeah.
And now, because I have these memories of going to a neighbor's home and having like this big, like there were a lot of people there and they were trying to sell Dianetics. And this is when I was probably 7 or something. And
Mhm.
so there was still involvement with Scientology. So I looked back, and this is only recently, in the past year or so, that I'm like, oh, that there, it must have been Scientology that I was brought into, because we
Yeah.
didn't do therapy. We didn't do medicine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we did niacin. My sister and I would OD on niacin to get out of school, and like there were
Jesus Christ.
things, so it's all oh, okay, this is one of the biggest stories though. Okay.
Hmm.
So when I was and I think I told this at a protest, just to another protester on my channel, but I was pregnant with my I think my second son. So he was born. This would have been 2010,
Hmm.
and I was reading the ex Scientology Kids website. I would just go in these deep dives and look into all this Scientology stuff. So 2010, and I came across the description of a contact assist, and I was like,
Okay.
this is something that I had taught my son, who was then 4 years old, 5 years old, because I thought it was just some hippie thing my father had taught me to put your arm back where it got injured. And so I was like, are you kidding me? And I had already been known Scientology was a cult for years. I had been studying, learning everything about it. And
Yeah.
so I was so disgusted that somehow this had seeped into my, like,
Your
passing it on to
subconscious.
my children. Like, I was just so, yeah. So um
Wow.
and that's just, yeah, one thing.
Yeah, and for people who don't know what a contact assist is, I actually had to do this. I went to a Scientology school and I actually had to do this if someone got hurt on the playground or something like that, right? And the idea is to put yourself back into the incident. So if let's say you stubbed your toe on the coffee table, you'd go back to that coffee table and you would repeatedly touch, not like you wouldn't kick like you would have when you actually stubbed your toe, but you'd repeat the action as close as you could and try and touch the exact spot where you were injured. And by doing that, it dissipates the charge attached with the traumatic incident. And this, I mean, stubbing the toe. It's My dad would do this. Like he would do contact assists at home, but it can go as far as like breaking your arm, or like major things. Obviously, they tell you do first aid first. If you're bleeding out, you got to deal with that. But then you're expected to go back to that area where you hurt yourself to release that charge. So I just think it's fascinating that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's 100% part of Scientology, but that
Yeah.
like seeped into your subconscious,
And I
and
mean,
you
I
were,
taught my child, and this is
yeah,
already after I have the awareness of, Scientology all my life. I was like this crazy thing that my parents were involved in
yeah,
somehow, which I don't really, understand fully because I don't have anyone to tell me the stories.
yeah. Can I ask you, are your parents still around? Are they passed on,
Uh,
or?
well, they uh, abandoned us as
Okay.
as young teens. So yeah,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, I'm
yeah,
sorry for that. It's, I mean, it is more indication that your parents were probably into Scientology, because that does tend to happen a lot. Kids do get abandoned. They get sent off. You know,
yeah,
it's this whole, as you say in your thing, the big beings thing, where you're not a child.
hmm
You are just a thetan in a small body, and
and
therefore you can be treated with it, whatever uh, reckless abandon, I would call it,
yeah.
you would with an adult person, kind of thing. So,
We were treated, I mean, we were just left to, we weren't raised, we were just
right.
left to fend for ourselves. That's really um how we, yeah, it's so interesting because I think that's so much a part of being able to relate to so many people in the ex Scientology community, is because even though I don't have the same stories directly related to going into Scientology or being audited or anything, all the other things, were my parents already narcissists, or was
Mhm.
their involvement in Scientology what, made them that way? Like, and I remember,
Yeah.
I mean, my father basically like parented like bull baiting. I mean, it's just weird. I remember staying up like all night once where he's just like, Nadja, do the dishes. And I'm like, I'm not going to do the dishes. Nadja, do the dish. Like, this is just back and forth. It just went on. And it's like,
Yeah.
um,
Repeat the auditing command.
yeah.
Do the dishes.
And I remember hearing him talk about past lives, that he was like some, um, king in Egypt or something. Like, and,
Wow.
and I thought that it was, that he had gone to a psychic, or, I didn't have a context. Like, and now
Yeah.
looking back, I'm like, oh no, that was Scientology. I mean,
It's
I
really
don't,
interesting to hear you talk about this, because like, and this is not what we were intending to talk about at all, but we'll get onto it. Like
yeah,
I said before, tangents happen.
yeah,
Um, I think it's fascinating to hear the same, I'm gonna use the word trauma, or the same behavioral results from being trained in a certain way, even though you weren't like going to an actual church or Scientology building repeatedly. You and I have the same sort of upbringing, and we still have the same ideas. And it's fascinating to me to see that it doesn't need Scientology mother church to have that result, right?
yeah,
It does come down to Scientology itself and its teachings. So
yeah,
I just found it very fascinating, because you're one of the first people I've talked to who hasn't had like a traditional Scientology experience, right?
yeah, yeah.
So
I don't, yeah.
yeah.
Um, there is one other, um, do you know the story of Ellie Perkins?
Not off the top of my head, no, but you're more than welcome to refresh people and myself.
So Ellie Perkins was a Scientologist in Buffalo.
Hmm.
My father, either they met in college, they met through RIT. She was an artist. She was a glass artist. My father was an artist. Went to the Rochester Institute of Technology. We were friends with. So he was friends. My parents were friends with her, and we were friends with their kids. She worked at like Renaissance festivals. She would have a booth selling her stained glass,
Mm.
and so I was friends with her kids. And in I forget when my sister told me, but she was like, "Oh my gosh, did you know about Ellie Perkins?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, "Do you remember our friends Jeremy and Danielle when we were kids?" And in 2003, Ellie Perkins was a Scientologist in Buffalo, and her son Jeremy stabbed her to death 77 times. He
Wow.
stabbed her. Um,
And I never heard of that, I don't think.
he had mental illness, and so this happened in 2003, and she was just trying to deal with it in her Scientology way, giving
Yeah.
him vitamins, putting him in a room, and so my sister told me this, and then I looked back and I realized, oh my gosh, in 2003 I had actually we ended up reconnecting with my father briefly.
Mhm.
He came to my graduation from basic training in the Army, and we were hanging out in a hotel room, and we were talking about things, and I mentioned Scientology, and he said, "Oh, I would still totally be a Scientologist if I could afford it." And I was like, "What?" That's the same year that that happened, in 2003. Like when he was
Wow.
saying that to me. Anyway, yeah.
Well, it's funny, I mean, it doesn't ring a bell. I don't think I've heard that
Yeah, it's not
incident.
a well-known story, and it's because it's different than the Lisa McPherson, because it wasn't like, it happened at her house, so it wasn't
Right.
like they were under the care of Scientology, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But it
I
definitely
mean, they
is.
were.
Yeah,
They're under the care of a Scientologist and Scientology teachings, right?
yeah.
For my viewers, and you probably know too, my dad was the executive director of CCHR, which is the front group that is main purpose is to literally eradicate psychiatry.
Hmm.
And so that teaching of not going to an actual doctor, not getting because they're going to put you on drugs, not being put on drugs, not getting real therapy is all consuming. Like there is no way around it. You can't tiptoe your toes into that and check it out. It just is nothing, all
Yeah,
or nothing. So, wow, you should
yeah,
do a full deep dive into that. I think people would be interested. I know I would. And it's not actually the first time I've heard of this happening, including people unaliving themselves and so forth. So
yeah,
it's insidious.
yeah.
All right. So that was your involvement in Scientology, growing up, sort of basically getting the teachings of Scientology in whatever manner it was done.
Hmm.
Um, you are also now one of the proud few people who have been able to attend an ideal org event as a protester, especially these new, big, beautiful buildings in your hometown. What was that like for you?
Um, so and Austin is I'm from upstate New York. But I've lived in Texas now for 20 plus years. Both
Yeah.
my kids were born here. Um, it's so interesting to me to feel like I've been watching all of this Scientology stuff, like all through my getting a master's in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And it's like my friends would joke about, I could get a PhD in cultic studies, or, on Scientology studies. Um,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh my gosh. And then people started protesting. I was like, oh, this is like, um, a way that I can actually do something instead of just watching, all the
Right.
content. And so it was exciting for me to feel like, I can actually do something, even though it was like, not liking the idea of Scientology, because I had actually gone and checked out their old place, before, and left the aftermath cards, because
Oh.
my kids and I also had gotten a stack of those. And a couple years ago when we drove to New York, we stopped at like the Oregon, Cincinnati, like, we just found, different orgs on the way, and we would leave aftermath cards and take
Mm.
pictures and send them to the Aftermath Foundation. Um, and so it just, it, yeah, it just felt like this makes sense that this is happening for me right now, to finally be able to do something.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I wonder why more people don't protest Scientology. Maybe, I don't know if it has to do with just being maybe scared or worried, or I have received emails from people who are concerned that if they show up with a picket sign outside their local organization are going to be followed or fair game and so forth. You're not.
They have Scientology has bigger fish to fry. They just
Exactly.
cannot, you know,
Yeah.
they,
I
yeah,
mean,
they don't have
if
the
you were,
resources.
yeah, I mean, if you were causing major issues with, and a video I did yesterday about how they have points for the
Yeah,
basically the level of attack that is happening.
yeah, I watched that.
If yeah, it's fascinating, and I kind of think like that's kind of how it is with attacks on organizations, like the test center, for example. It's not just a test center. That is the main hub for international Scientology as far as an administrative basis. It's where they have the life exhibit as well for L. Ron Hubbard and all this stuff. So it's a pretty major building.
Right.
So for that being protested so heavily, that's going to get their attention.
Yeah.
But if you just show up and you have a sign that's saying F Sciento, like,
Hmm.
that sign there, and
Yeah.
or Scientology destroys families or whatever message you want to send out there, they're not going to fair game you. You're not going to get attacked. Your life isn't going to be ruined. It's not what they do. They don't have the manpower,
Yeah.
frankly,
Yep.
because there are so many people attacking Scientology right now.
Yep.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
And on a really effective basis, I think. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. I'm glad you get the opportunity to do that. For me, I felt very, very nervous, and I had some very traumatic reactions the first time I went down. Physically nauseous, and my legs weren't working, and all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff was happening. What was it like for the first time you went down there? Do you recall?
Yeah, because well, even I didn't go this past weekend, but the weekend before was the first time that I went on a Sunday morning, and I really wanted to get out there before, to catch people going in, Scientologists actually going in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually too nervous to be there myself.
Mm,
And it's not like nervous about, it was just my body. There was just a physical reaction. It wasn't like in my head I felt nervous. It was just like my body was kind of shaking, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait until other protesters are going to be here. I just did not was and it wasn't like there was an actual fear. It was just a weird body reaction. And I think that same thing happened, well, each time that I've gone, especially with the opening.
mhm,
I also, with the opening, when I first got there was like an interaction with this man. Um and it, it's interesting that, like, I felt comfortable going live, and just, because he saw some of the signs, and he said those are lies, and then I was just like, really? So my parents telling me when I was 4 years old, what did I do to pull in what happened to me? I just went right there, and I was like, it just got me emotional and a little bit shaky. So because I interacted with him before I even got to actually, like, that was walking into protest. I had already gone live, but it was, so I was already kind of, um, shaky. It was hard to come down from that,
yeah,
being there.
I get it. Um, it's funny, like when you mentioned them saying their responses, well, that's a lie. That's not true. They're told, at least the public, and certainly a lot of the staff, are briefed on how to respond to all this. So they're not immune. They know what's going to happen. They know what
Hmm.
you're going to say, and they drill and they practice responding to these things. And they're told that it's made up. It's part of their reactive mind. It's just not real, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very easy for them just to dismiss. And certainly that was the case for me as well when I was in. I could say, "Oh, that guy's just an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just burning his future."
Hmm.
Like this is the attitude that they have,
Yeah.
that you are literally destroying your future, and like not just this lifetime, but like your eternity by doing this.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of fear for that to happen to them if they were to actually face the actual reality of the situation, right? So
Yeah.
it's a good way for them to shut down and just ignore and
Yeah.
close the blinds and turtle is it called the turtle drill, right? Where they just like run and hide,
Yeah.
or stick their head in the sand or whatever. So
Mhm.
And on that note about blinds, does Austin have blinds, or is it just
Yep. I
yeah?
caught it on I think the not last weekend, but the Sunday before that I hadn't noticed them close the blinds since opening, and I was like, hey, and then it was just like I caught them putting down every blind,
I love it.
smiling, giving me that, smile, and then people probably saw that they had hired an off-duty police officer at least one day. Pearl Snappy, had them out there, and I'm just like, it's just bad optics. Like,
Yeah.
now you guys have this guy, this off-duty Austin police officer in there, like smiling and chatting it up with. I'm like, you're on the wrong side of history, man. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny though, because like these are David Miscavige's babies, these orgs, these buildings, right? And now he has to hide them.
yeah,
And it's just gotta right piss him off.
yeah,
He must be so furious. And then of course, you got there, it's right by the University of Texas, correct?
yeah, right across the street.
Yeah. And
It's where
so like
it's in the nook with all these churches. Like, this is where the religious center for the university is.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. They're trying to
But they
ingratiate
all have
themselves in that
they're all
community.
flying, LGBTQIA flags,
Yeah.
and then Scientology is just blank. It's just
Yeah.
this people keep, they talk about how beautiful the buildings are, but I'm like, there's nothing warm and inviting about that building. It
Yeah.
is it just looks like this intimidating, blank building.
It's very modern looking.
Hmm.
Um, very clean, square lines. I think the architecture is great, but yeah, as far as like a church goes,
Right.
which is what they're supposed to be, people,
Yeah.
definitely not a business or a cult. They don't really put that image across as somewhere where you'd want to go into, you
Yeah.
know. And I can't imagine that there's any uh, desire for those university students, who is what they want to go after. They want the younger people. Um,
The
there's no incentive for them to go in. Like, there's a cop at the door basically, and their blinds are closed. It's not exactly very inviting, right? So
Yeah. I mean, I think it's only when we're there, when Pearl Snappy is there, that they put the
yeah.
blinds down. I mean, but they still can't, like, there's the front door, like, unless it's locked, it doesn't actually close the front door.
Oh,
Like, we talk about their, front door tech, they're failing the front door tech. Because, like, every time someone goes in and out, they have to come and physically, like, close the door, or else
that's
they
awesome.
can hear inside, and then it's like, yeah, with yeah, it's just
That's so
it's just a
funny.
complete failure. And the students there, most of them, before the opening, they were so confused, like, why are you out here protesting? This building is abandoned. Like, they thought that it was just, that Scientology had just packed up and moved out, because they
Yeah.
they were like, I don't understand what you're doing. They're gone. Like, there's even one of the students on the video saying that, like, what are you doing? And so now it's like, they're like, oh my gosh, they really are here now. The garbage bags have been taken down, and yeah, the students are just not, um yeah, they're not about the Scientology. We get honking, yeah, it's a cult, people driving by and
That's awesome.
walking by. Yeah.
You have quite the contingent of people there in Austin, doing this. You got Pearl Snappy, yourself. Sorry, Freelance Adventure
Miss
joined
Kim.
you as well. Her name is
Well, that's KK. Yeah, Freelance Adventure. But
yeah,
then Miss Kim has been out
right.
there.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It's awesome to see. I would love to have more people doing that in Vancouver, but it's so awkward to get to, and I think that's
Oh,
probably part of the problem. Maybe
the
once the
location.
weather is nicer, we'll have a bit more activity there. But
Yeah.
that building, there's no one going in. And half the people who are walking by are either homeless or drug addicted. So it's not something that Scientology is interested in. They wouldn't want them to come in anyway.
Right.
And the other half of the people are just like zooming through onto way to business or something. So they're certainly not doing much outreach. Let's just say that.
Right. Yeah.
um, cool. So do you have like the way that you protest, and of course, I don't know, maybe it's just more of an American thing now that I'm thinking about it, but um, it's much more, let's just use the word boisterous. It's loud. It's projecting your voice. It's a bit more, I guess, aggressive, not in a bad way. And I don't mean to put that connotation on it, but what are your opinions on different methods of protesting? Like, what do you think is the best? Is there a best way? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I, for me, I think whatever works for someone, I, I is really, because there is bringing awareness, right, to people outside of Scientology, to just like um just bring awareness, regardless of whether it's positive, negative, just to highlight this is something that's happening. um there's So that's more for public education, right? There's ways to do it that way. But then there's people who like trying to reach Scientologists, trying to break through, which, as we discussed coming on, it's like, it's not, um, my goal is to just have Scientology lose its tax exempt status in the US. I mean, that
Mhm.
really, because I think that just that will help bring Scientology down. It'll help wake people up who, have been under the radar. And yeah. So I remember, so Pearl Snappy and I feel like we have different approaches.
Mhm.
Um, but because I remember the first night that I went, it might have been the graduation that we first went to in Pflugerville. And I just remember being kind of like shocked at some of the things that she was saying, and like, and thinking, oh, kind of being like a little bit like uncomfortable, and that's not the approach that I would have. But I mean, I was in the army, like, the saying of like, I may not um you know do what you're doing, but I'm gonna fight to protect your right to do that.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's my stance, is that I completely support Pearl Snappy. She has a way of bringing people in, making things funny, singing, doing all that. I can't sing, I'm not as quick-witted, like, so we all have different ways, different things that we can bring to the table. So I don't think that there's any one way. And I actually felt disheartened. There was a commenter, I didn't even know how to respond to, someone on some of my posts. They were indirectly talking about Pearl Snappy, but without saying her name, and
Yeah.
saying, you know, you shouldn't let the like one trick pony or something, and uh over um like, we want to hear your voice, basically, and you shouldn't let this person drown out your voice or something. And I'm like, I don't want anyone to sow discontent among us, protesters who are all trying to do the same thing, or
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Is that the right way? Is
yeah,
that the right
yep,
saying?
yep,
You know, I don't believe that any of the protesting is going to directly change anyone's mind about being in Scientology. And in fact, in most cases, due to certain references in Scientology, it's actually going to harden them into
hmm,
Scientology. It's just the way it works.
yeah,
Especially, at least in my experience, especially if you're loud and aggressive towards someone, just in general, it does tend to make someone not want to talk to you. That's my personal opinion.
yep,
But I don't think, regardless of that, I don't think any way to protest Scientology will get someone out directly, but it might plant seeds.
yeah,
And I think it's important that, because everybody is different, everybody in Scientology is ultimately different. They are a unique individual. they will respond differently to different approaches.
Mhm.
And that's why it's important to have the whole spectrum represented,
Yeah.
you know?
Agree.
Um, never ends, people who are probably in, but sort of in, like yourself, like you don't really know. You
Mhm.
have the trauma there, though. You have the teachings and you have the experience. To someone like me, who was a second gen, who was trafficked and kidnapped and like had much more abuse, to everyone else who was doing this. So I think it's great that no matter how you're doing it, that you're just doing it. You know,
Yeah.
that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So, um, cool. Do you have plans for your upcoming future in protesting Scientology? I mean, as a little mention that tomorrow is L. Ron Hubbard's birthday,
Yeah. Yep.
as well as my dog's birthday. So
I
please
know.
take a moment to wish Raz a happy birthday.
Yes.
Anybody who wants to, I'll definitely do a little community post. Anybody who wants to leave good messages for him, I'll pass them along. And if you guys wanted to buy him a cookie or something, I do have a buy me a coffee. Uh,
Buy him a
just put
cookie.
Raz's name in there, and I'll buy him a treat. We seem to have lost.
Yeah,
There
that
you
was
are. You're back.
I didn't have my phone on do not disturb.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if anyone wants to buy Raz a cookie, I will. If you put Raz in the buy me a coffee, I will. I'll buy him a treat, um, with your name on it. What was I saying? So yeah. So tomorrow's Elrich's birthday. Do you have any plans with protesters to go back there?
Yeah.
Or
Yes. I mean, yeah, so I'm teaching right now. So I have spring break right now.
convenient.
So I will be able to be out there. I know it's amazing how the stars have aligned. Like, how's the universe pulling this in, Scientology? No.
Yeah, exactly.
um,
What'd you do to pull us in,
right,
Scientology? I love
right.
that message, by the way.
Oh, I
Um,
know.
when I was in
So,
Portland, I think I said I was saying, asking people to shatter me, which of course they can't. But,
yeah,
I love asking people what they did to pull me in because they
and
believe that they did something.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, and that is something. I don't know if you've seen some of my videos, but
Mhm.
you know, asking like confront and shatter, I'm here, confront and shatter the suppression. I'm and
Yeah.
it's there were just some interesting um conversations that I had. Like there was a fellow veteran that I saw at the opening, and I was like,
Mm.
hey, and so he started talking to me. But it was interesting. He was like, when were you in? Like, I don't know what answer he thought I was going to give, but
Yeah.
he seemed kind of, it was an older Vietnam veteran. And he he seemed kind of surprised when I said that I deployed twice, in 2003 and 2006. And
Mhm.
he was like, oh, well, thank you for your service. And then as I started to ask about, how do you feel about making such large donations to your church? And then all of a sudden a hand went up in the camera and he was body routed,
Yeah.
away. Um,
I love that because obviously, I know people at my local org. I worked there for many, many years. And I love just saying hello to someone and letting them talk.
yeah,
Like if you just say hello and let someone talk and just don't say anything, they can say the dumbest stuff and the
yeah,
most hilarious stuff. But, as soon as they see someone talking to someone like you or myself or anyone else that's protesting, their handlers move out and they grab them. I mean, my last video, I got a hug
I know that.
from a lady,
I
and
know.
she's the nicest lady
It was
ever.
so sweet.
And the fact that she couldn't talk to me, even though we had this huge history together,
Yeah.
only because I was standing outside with a camera.
Yep.
I don't bring signs to my org. I don't need to, right? I'm
Yep.
not giving the message to anybody important, so there's no point holding a sign. But the look and the disappointment on her face it really hit me.
Yeah.
It's brutal. So I like though watching the reactions to when you have a normal conversation with a human being and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're suppressive and it
Yeah.
can't happen anymore.
I mean,
It's brutal.
one there was an older woman who said that she had been in Scientology for 50 years and she actually like spoke to me. I mean, she almost showed empathy in her face when I talked about my story, you know, and that and I mean, but I didn't understand, like, because I was trying to tell her, but you know that Scientology sees that I pulled that in. And she was like, no, of course you didn't, you know? And it's like, does she really mean that? Or is this just her Scientology approach? You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to say. Um, yeah.
It's
What's
hard to say
really going
because
on?
they're so disingenuous,
Yeah.
right? They have a preconceived notion of you already, and so they're probably just giving you lip service and acting you,
Yeah.
um, just to get rid of you and just change the conversation. It happened like when I was in the UK, talking to the OSA guys. They
Hmm.
are good at it. They wanted to distract us,
Yeah.
right? And that was their goal. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the goal for them, I think. Could be
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
just
mean,
want to
one of the gentlemen, like, I, it, he's saying on a live stream, I couldn't make out whether he was saying there were 15,000 or 50,000 Scientologists there. But either one of those was wrong, and he believed whatever he was saying. He's like, look at all the
yeah.
Scientology. I was asking him how many there are, and he was like, there's 15,000 here or 50,000. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, looking at those shots, if you've seen the
Yeah.
photographs that they took, there's no way there's more than 400.
Well, you
Maybe.
could count them.
I mean, you could count the heads.
Yeah. I know it's nutty. And it's just one of the conversations I've been having with James, and people who don't know who James is, he's a good friend of mine. He's been pulled back into Scientology in Vancouver. Every conversation I've been telling him the truth and the real stats and so forth. And it's important. I think that is an important alley to get into somebody's mind about Scientology, is to tell them the actual stats. Like, because they're told these, what is it, like 10 million members worldwide.
Yeah.
And my friend SP Chef actually just did a video on his channel where he breaks down some of the math and like how many Scientologists there would actually be in each org. And it's an absurd amount
Yeah.
because most class 5 orgs only have about 200 to 400 kind of public
Yeah.
in the field, right? If there was 10 million uh, Scientologists, there'd be thousands
Right.
at each org. So
Right.
it just that like dissonance
The
could get through to someone.
yeah.
But then, of course, the ideal orgs being big booming areas, go to them. Go take a look. You're a Scientologist. Go on a tour.
Yeah.
Go see how empty they are.
And I think that is one of the things of all the live streamers. If people can actually go to all of these buildings, the buildings that are not being occupied, like
Yeah.
to actually show, because instead of everyone's been told all these things, and then to actually show this, it's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, they were not going to open the Austin org because they couldn't get 30 staff members.
Yep.
I mean,
Exactly. And
that's
that's not the full contingent.
right.
There needs to be more staff. It was such an unreal target that
Mhm.
Dave Miscavige lowered the bar at least a couple times
Yep.
so they could open. Like,
Yeah.
that's not nearly enough staff to run a building that big. That's a
Yeah.
massive building. And
Yeah.
there's tons of posts. And I showed an org board of OSA yesterday.
Mhm.
That's what a regular class 5 org board looks like too. All
Yeah.
those divisions, hundreds of posts, and they're
Yeah.
just all being held from above, and everyone's all stressed out. So it's nutty. And then, of course, the ideal org openings, every single one that happens, they come up with 75 or whatever amount of staff, and a few months later it gets knocked down because people leave. They realize they can't afford to do it, or they're out ethics or whatever. It's all about pumping the numbers up for the opening and then move on to the next, right? So it's like
Yeah.
fast fashion for the orgs. It's like pump it all out, but it
Yeah.
ends up just being garbage.
Yeah.
There's nothing behind it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway, kind of a weird analogy, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Oh,
cool.
so
So you get
you were saying about, so I am going to be protesting tomorrow. And then I'm going to keep going out at least once on the weekends when I can. I had to take a mental health this past weekend. I just, I needed to spend time with my kids and yeah. But I don't work, I don't have a job lined up for the summer. So I am hoping to be out there a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to it.
And I will say that like this, like interviewing, I don't know how, I don't have a big channel, but I do love having conversations with people.
Yeah.
And I think that I would love to interview people who, like protesters, like the ones that we haven't heard from. And because, there's so many channels, there's so much going on, but being able to, especially the people who, like, even though I consider myself a never in, but then I do have this weird Scientology connection because even I didn't even talk about, like friends that we weren't allowed to talk to anymore when I was a kid. And now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, her mom was in Scientology and her parents got divorced. And, like it's so weird trying to piece together my past. But that's one thing. I mean, part of it is selfish, wanting to get exposure so that I can have people reach out to me to send me information about, places that I was at certain times or things like that. I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, right. Just wanting to interview people who are never in and talk about like what, because there are people who are in abusive relationships or came from, my family. My mother was kind of a cult leader. Like it was the same kind of dynamic. We had weird, just things about our family that operated almost like a cult. Like, okay, tell, this injury happened and so just tell people this happened, but it's a short story. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, I think that would be fascinating because there are times where I work like an hour away from the downtown Austin, and so it's not convenient for me to be able to. I would be out there every day if I could be, but maybe on the days when I'm not, that I can still bring awareness and talk to people about how they got involved and those kinds of things.
That'd be awesome. And you don't have a way to contact you on your YouTube page yet, but I'm sure you will add something onto there. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. And
I can give the email also. If
sure.
anyone wants to contact me, it's acupunkatx@gmail.com.
I'll put that in the chat real quick. I wasn't sure which email you wanted me to do that.
Yeah.
But acupunkatx@gmail.com.
Yes.
There you go. Is in there. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to Nadja,
yep.
They can do that. And I do look forward to seeing more of your videos. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we just go over a couple of quick questions?
Nope.
Cool. Well, then we'll just get right into it.
Okay.
We got Auntie here. We can both answer this from our different perspectives. Question: do you think Scientology, as a fearful mafia organization that it used to be, how would the people protesting feel about it? Protesting it feel about it? I think referring to the fact that they used to be more powerful versus now. That's one. I'll tell a story here. The other day, I was at the dog park with Raz. My wife and I were there, and this gentleman came up, and we were just chit-chatting because he had his dog too, and they were playing. And it turns out he works at the Justice Department for training in BC here. And he was kind of asking what I do, and I said, well, one of the things I do is this YouTube channel, and I'm covering Scientology. And he goes, oh, Scientology, and he starts going off about how they're very litigious and very legal minded. I said they are, but they aren't anymore because they can't afford to. And I started telling all about Debbie Cook and the fact that they're afraid to be deposed and so forth, right? And so yes, they do have the power to be annoying. If you're a really big pain in their necks, they will do more. But there's really not. They're quite defanged these days. Um, Partly because they don't have the manpower to deal with it, but also because they know that if they go too far, everyone's got a phone. Everyone's watching what they're doing. They can't get away with it anymore. You know, just like the mafia probably wouldn't be, shooting people and doing all this if they're just on camera all the time. Because back in the day, they used to be able to get away with it, Scientology, but
Yeah.
now they can't. And I just love it. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's interesting. I was watching, Tori Magoo. I was
Yeah.
watching that video of hers from the 80s or the 90s. Must
I'm
have
not
been
sure
from,
which one, but
well, it was her standing outside of an org protesting. And so
mhm,
it's just a handful of them. And Scientology has the cameras on them, right?
yeah,
And now we're turning the cameras on Scientology. It's like a beautiful, evolution that has happened,
yeah,
that now it's like what was their like strongest, tactic to intimidate is totally turned on them. I love that. I think it's amazing.
yeah. It is amazing, and there's so much footage of Scientology doing camebacks and so forth, and I mean
Yeah.
that's normal for people to do. They think that like in the auditor community, the First Amendment auditor community, where someone puts a cam back on them, it's like, yeah, but we this is what we're doing. We're exercising that right.
Yes.
And I love that America and Canada have the same basic laws on that, because you can go and film in public in Canada as well.
Yeah.
um, but that comeback doesn't mean anything. I think the thought process that was at least going in Scientology's head and those people's heads is that by putting a camera on the suppressive person, it's like symbolically exposing who they are, kind of thing. It's
Hmm.
like making them look in a mirror, and
Hmm.
they hope that it's gonna shatter them or whatever. It's not necessarily about gaining uh, gathering intel, although
Right.
in some cases it is.
Right.
Um, I just think they have this idea that by putting a camera on someone, it's gonna make them stop doing something.
Yeah.
It's like, probably not,
Yeah.
unless they're doing something illegal.
That's like I already have a camera basically on me filming all of the things.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
I don't have my camera on me almost ever. But
yeah, but you're on camera all the time. There's
yeah.
cameras everywhere,
Oh yeah.
right? So people having a problem being on camera, it's like that's not a thing anymore.
That's not the
Maybe,
world we live in of not being
yeah, especially like if you're in the UK or something like that, where there's literally a camera everywhere,
CTV
and,
every.
and the police have access to it.
Yeah.
No warrants needed. It just goes right to their headquarters, stuff like that. So I don't know. I just think it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But they are definitely more defanged, and thanks to people like Tori Magoo, and thanks to all the uh,
Yeah.
older generation doing this kind of thing, speaking out, Jerry Armstrong and Amy Scobie, and like all these people. Um, I could list out a million names, but
So many
it's
people.
it's very thankful that we get to do this and not have to worry about the Scientology attacks.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Quick super chat here. Thank you very much. Happy birthday. I think
Facts.
I meant his name is Raz, but thank you. He says woof. He says woof. And thank you to Winston Smith for gifting 10 memberships to my channel.
Cool.
Um, that's very generous of you. For anyone who doesn't know, I do have the membership program, which gives you access to two things. I don't like to limit content, especially if it's important with Scientology, because that's not what my channel is about. But I have made some custom emojis that you guys can use in the chat, including one of Raz, as well as Dave Miscavige, a sheep from one of our shorts that Andrew and I made. And it also gives you access to a little Davey video that we made that is not available to everybody, but it's just kind of fun. So thank you guys for who are supporting my channel. It's important and needed at this point. Let me take these guys off. I'm messing up there. Last question we have here is from Lavender Bridges. I feel like I heard on one of the SPT podcasts that you could not be in Scientology if you had ever held a security clearance. Is that true? Yes. So if you've ever been signed, I'll get a little bit of background. Scientology is a very paranoid organization. Back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there was a lot of infiltration from government officials in order to find out information about Scientology. And because of that, if you've ever held a clearance in one of these organizations, you are not trusted, no matter what. They just won't trust you. You won't be able to go up the OT levels, stuff like that. So it is definitely a fact. You can probably do like smaller courses, but you won't be ever trusted with information that's important because they believe that you are brainwashed as a government agent and using pain, drug, and hypnosis in order to infiltrate Scientology. It's a very deeply held conspiracy theory. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That just made me think. So I mentioned like that I think my parents were involved in some weird independent Scientology in before moving to Buffalo, and then I know for sure that my father helped work on the buildings or worked at the org, and so that would have been like 76, 77. And my father, it's like I can't believe he wasn't in the Sea Org. Like that just, I feel like just from what little I know that's what he would have done, but it's because he did LSD, he did drugs. Like both of my parents had done, he was a pot smoker and LSD. I'm sure that is why he wasn't in the Sea Org, which thanks LSD.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for everything else you do, LSD.
Yeah.
I've never used it before, but I've heard there's a lot of studies that are happening right now in regards to helping with PTSD and so forth. So
Yes.
that's pretty cool. But yeah, definitely if you've done LSD, you're not allowed in the Sea Org. It's an out qualifications. It's one of the very few out qualifications actually.
Yeah.
So cool. Thank you very much for that question, Lavender Bridges. I think we're going to wrap up. We're coming up to about an hour here.
Yeah.
I will share with everybody your channel again, Accupunk, at Accupunk. Yeah, she's doing some fun stuff over there. And if you would like to reach out for an interview, I think that you'd be great at interviewing. You're very intelligent. You're very easy to talk to. And I'm so glad I had you on my channel.
Yeah, same.
Thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you to the replay crew. Please leave a comment so I can know that you've been there, and it helps pump out the videos. If you guys want to support my channel in a financial way, you can. There are links in the description. Every little bit is appreciated and thankful. Nadja, thank you very much. We'll see you again.
So much. Okay.
Nola, how's it going?
For fuck's sake.
For fuck's sake, she says. What's your post?
Well, what are you doing?
I'm not on staff, that's for sure.
You're definitely filming something.
Anyway, I gotta go because I'm gonna get in shit if I keep talking to you. You know that.
But doesn't that kind of bother you a little bit? That you get in shit for communicating with somebody?